Hi, everybody. This is Matt Johnson, legal counsel of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. I'm here today to give you an update on the ever-shifting federal rules regarding evictions of tenants for non-payment of rent. If you went back last week, the eviction moratorium that had been in place for a significant period of time expired on July 31st. There was a brief window when there was no eviction moratorium, and only this week, the CDC has now rolled out an additional modified eviction moratorium that is now in place and is in place through October 3rd, 2021, unless extended. I do note that is already being challenged in the court, in the Supreme Court previously with the prior eviction moratorium cast doubt on whether the CDC had the authority to do this. So stay tuned, but the way the court moves, the chances of them ruling before this moratorium expires probably remote. So you're probably going to have it and have to deal with it. So a couple things. It doesn't change the underlying prior moratorium terms much. The only difference now is this moratorium only applies if you are in a county experiencing substantial or high rates of community transmission of COVID-19 as calculated by the CDC. Right now, that is only 3 counties in New Hampshire, which is Hillsborough County, Rockingham County, and Stratford County, I believe. The trial court sent out a notice indicating that any evictions for non-payment in those counties would be stayed. However, the other thing to remember is those numbers and those metrics continue to evolve. So were you to start an eviction for non-payment of rent and that county then rose to the level of substantial or high transmission, that eviction would be stayed. So again, it is a challenge to figure out what to do about it. But I do want to explain a few items that I think get glossed over. This is not as much a moratorium as I would say a limited restriction on evicting someone for non-payment of rent. So a couple points to remember. If you have a client that is trying to evict a tenant for any reason other than non-payment of rent, this moratorium and order from the CDC does not apply. Same rules apply. You can proceed as you normally would. Second, it does not mean the non-payment of rent evictions cannot happen. Several things have to occur before the moratorium is in place. And frankly, there are some significant hurdles the tenant has to meet to qualify. First and foremost, the tenant has to participate in the process. If the tenant completely ignores the landlord-tenant process and does not show up and does not represent themselves or speak to the court is going to enter a writ of possession and that tenant is going to be evicted. Even assuming that the tenant does, the way the tenant gets the protections of the moratorium is they have to complete a somewhat detailed declaration form under oath that the CDC prepares. There are Spanish language versions, there are English language versions, there may even be other language versions, which requires them to certify a significant amount of information. First, there are income qualifications. So you have to certify that your income is below a certain threshold or you meet certain other income criteria. Second, you have to certify that you've actually been affected by COVID in a way of either losing your job or having your hours reduced or unable to pay your rent. You have to, it's not as if you have a tenant that has not been affected because they're in an industry that has not been impacted by COVID-19, they are not going to be able to qualify. And third, they have to certify a bunch of criteria, particularly that they have used their best efforts to obtain government assistance and have been unable to, and have used their best efforts to at least make partial payments to the landlord. So to the extent they made no payments and no effort, question whether a landlord can challenge the validity of that certification in a court proceeding. So it is not guaranteed, or it does not mean that all tenants cannot be evicted. Again, it has to be for non-payment of rent, and it only applies if a tenant can complete the declaration form and qualifies under all of the criteria set forth by the CDC. Particularly the aspect, but another point to stress that I've repeatedly stressed is there is a significant amount of federal money out there, including in New Hampshire, for rental assistance. And there is data that suggests that lots of landlords and tenants don't even know this exists. So one of the aspects of what you could do in this situation is make sure your clients know that they can apply for this information and qualify for the money. because again, ultimately landlords really want to get paid, and there is rental assistance out there to make that happen. That rental assistance will be backwards looking. It's not as if the tenant gets to discount the rent or doesn't have to pay back rent. There is nothing in these orders that alters the terms of the arrangement or prevents a landlord from recovering any late fees or interest or anything else that the lease provides for non-payment of rent. So but hopefully the federal government can pick up some of that. I know the process is slow, but please advise landlords and tenants that this is out there. And tenants, if they give the authority, the landlords can help them complete the process and complete the paperwork, and that can be in the best interest of everybody. Finally, on that point as well, be aware that SB 126 was passed, which amends landlord-tenant law significantly in a couple ways. But one way that's important to note is that if you do proceed or have a client that proceeds to evict a tenant, that tenant now can defeat the non-payment eviction anytime up to the hearing on the merits if they can make payment in full or show proof that they're going to have the government assistance to be able to make the payment. So that changes. It used to be that the timeline for the tenant to do that was much earlier in the process. That's been extended, I believe, because of the recognition of some of the slowness in getting the money out from the federal and state governments. So again, talk to your clients, make them aware of these issues, make them aware of the moratorium, but remember, it is not as necessarily as sweeping as it sometimes has presented. Your landlord clients, to the extent they're seeking to evict someone, should really talk to counsel who is familiar with the status of the eviction so they can get up-to-date guidance on how and if they can proceed against a particular tenant under their circumstances. Thanks very much.